2, 3. I would also like to mention two things which, as far as I know, are never considered. I understand that people are trapped in the time in which they live. However, I ask you, what of the Japanese government's immorality regarding its refusal to surrender and that action's influence on how the war ended? Have the Japanese ever recognized the influence that decision had over how the war ended? Here are some facts. On the 9th of June 1945, Emperor Hirohito's confidant, Kochi-Kido, wrote a draft plan for controlling a crisis situation, warning that by the end of 1945, Japan's ability to wage modern war would be extinguished and the government would be unable to contain civil unrest. That looming reality and its warning, plus the dropping of 2 atomic bombs, was still not enough, because the Japanese government was still split over the decision to surrender and had to take the argument to the emperor for a final decision. It is true that at least some Japanese leaders believed that the United States didn't have any more nuclear weapons and were willing to take that risk by continuing the war. Why does the conditioning of the Japanese culture and tradition of that time excuse them from all ethical responsibility as to how the war ended? A few men, military and political, plus the emperor, in their positions of comfort and power, were willing to sacrifice the population of a whole nation, not just the population of 2 cities. Why is their morality never questioned? All questioning has been focused on the Americans. The Japanese only surrendered in the end when they realized that they weren't going to be able to kill the Americans like they had hoped. All of a sudden the attitude, die fighting or suicide for the emperor with honor before surrender, this attitude was forgotten and abandoned. The second point, after the 2 bombs were dropped, the only nation in the world to protest to the United States was Japan. No nation had any sympathy for Japan at the time. The Japanese couldn't approach any other nation to seek support on this history-changing event because there was no support for them. Is there any immorality or wrong to be found in the other nations of the world saying nothing? Can the silence of the rest of the world after the bombs were dropped be seen as support for the decision to use them? A final comment. Isn't it ironic that Japan and its imperial forces, whenever they defeated a nation or an army, they always demanded unconditional surrender, or the conquered people would pay the price, death. And death came in abundance anyway, even if you did surrender.